All right, we are live. Jason, welcome. Good morning.
Hey, good morning, Phil. Hey, those on the Facebook Live, probably just going to hear me talk. Um, Phil's going to go live on his page. For some reason, we can't get this on both sides of the things. I think it's a business page kind of troubleshooting issue that we'll work on a little bit later this afternoon. So you'll see us multiple times. This time you're only going to see my face, but next time you'll see both of our faces. So right on. So what are we going to talk about today, Phil?
I thought it was important. Well, we thought it was important that we talk about the actual validation process. First off, maybe 5% of those people who have thought about business ownership as an option ever take steps forward. And there's a lot of reasons why that is. If we can shed a little light on that mysterious journey that folks go on, it might help them have some confidence stepping in and knowing what to expect. So I think those are the things we're going to talk about today. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's one of the scariest things is for a lot of people, especially those of that have been in a long-standing career kind of job, whether it's in the military or if they're leaving a corporate job that they've been at for 10 to 15 years. It's validating, business ownership as an option, particularly franchising. That's what we're talking about today. But there's some basic needs that need to be met before going into or even thinking about going into a business. And that's, certainty. Comfort. You got to know that it's going to work for you, right? You're going to take this plunge into something, and it's fear of the unknown. So how one of the biggest things that we're going to talk about is how do you validate that as something that will work for you, right, Phil?
Yep, awesome. And I wanted to touch on this before we get into that whole conversation. Oftentimes, folks that are thinking about business ownership pop on the internet and start doing some reading and read websites, and sometimes they get brave enough to send their information in and they get a phone call back from a salesperson. Here's the challenge with that, and there's really two challenges with that. One of them is confirmation bias, right? In psychologically speaking, we tend to look for and agree with the things that agree with us. We hear things based on what we believe, and those things resonate, and we challenge the things we don't sometimes, and we do this without knowing. Secondarily, there's a perception bias that can occur. Great example. I had an aunt or uncle that owned a restaurant, and the restaurant, they ended up having to close. So entrepreneurship, is a challenge. If you go into it with those, perceptions or individual one-off experiences, you're going to tend to confirm what you already suspect. And that's why, Jason, I know you're going to talk a little bit about the things that happen before we start talking about businesses. That's why that is so important. So back to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Coming into, entrepreneurship's like, hey, my uncle owned a slot skis back in the 90s or something like that. And, they're having some issues in that franchise system and it went under. Or, my aunt or uncle, like you said, they've owned that restaurant for so long, and I see that they never had any kind of work-life balance. They're worried about the business. They're taking work home with them. They're balancing the budget over, bedtime stories with their folks and things like that, right? Very valid points, but that's not always the case. And one of the things that before we even start off on this, one of the things I say to folks, if that was not, if that wasn't really the case, would it make a difference? And of course it would, right? And it's not always the case. It is not always the case. You can be that entrepreneur that is rise and grind, doing the Gary Vee thing, working their 80 hours a week, however many hours are in a week. You have to have every single one of them is going to be working. That's not why people do franchise. That's why the franchise system exists.
Yeah. Awesome points. So let's talk about, again, you can go on the internet based on the things you know today, research some things. We found as an organization that 95% of our clients end up getting into a business they never suspected they would. And they do that based on a little bit of guidance and help from us. So what does that look like and why is it important, that first meeting and the second meeting to follow?
Well, first off, I want to say hello to Dave. Dave on Facebook Live. Appreciate seeing you, man. So can you say your question one more time, Phil?
Yeah. So, we talked about perception bias, right? And statistically, our organization has found that 95% of our folks get into a business they never thought that they would. And they do that because of the discovery conversations we go through before we even start talking about business models. So yeah, I thought it'd be cool if you talk a little bit about what that looks like.
Yeah. So first of all, you have to really determine why you even want to have a change. Why are we making a change here? Is it because of poor career economy? Maybe you're in a job, you cycle in and out of jobs every 2 to 3 years. Well, yeah, that's a good reason to change. Find something that might be a little bit more secure. The other thing is, what is your income goal? What is your lifestyle goal? Maybe you've already had that first career. You're retired from the military, or you're drawing a pension from state or some other kind of organization. And a lot of folks, they don't want to stop working, but they also don't want to work super hard, and they want to be able to enjoy the second career. Maybe they have grandkids now. Maybe they have new family, and they want to enjoy that family and take their lives in a different direction. So we're finding what their why is, basically, and we call it the ILWE, your income, lifestyle, wealth, and equity goals. We dive into that much deeper, and we kind of flesh that out. And how you say that 95% statistic, they find that business is a vehicle towards their goals. It's not necessarily, hey, I was an IT guy, I must be in an IT business. I've always been a carpenter, I must have a carpentry business. Well, what if it was a home furnishings business? What if it was something else? What if it was a porta potty business? That's one of the biggest stories that we tell in this business all the time. It's a porta potty business where you're not actually cleaning toilets, but you're exercising these soft skills. Maybe it's more of a leadership kind of job. Maybe it's a project management job. You're doing logistics and statistics, and maybe you're only working 20 hours a week in that business. Like, wow, that's going to change my mind, right?
Yep. Yeah, it's really true. In that conversation, you really get a 360 view, past, present, and then you start dreaming and scheming towards the future. And with regard to business ownership, you really start with the blank canvas, right? In these conversations, we start with the blank canvas and begin to build out based on the things that we learn. And yeah, I mean, I can't tell you how many times clients begin with a set of industries in mind. And as the conversation goes on, I usually tell the pooper scooper story.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, we actually had a product in our inventory, and someone left a Wall Street job to go do that. And certainly he wasn't the one going into backyards and city parks. He was managing a team of people. Lifestyle was important to him. He ended up meeting all his income expectations over the course of 3.5 years, and worked about 6 months a year. And these are the things you find out are important. We tend to focus just on earning, because that's, I think, the traditional job market thinking. And that's an important aspect, obviously, but there, as you touched on, lifestyle, wealth and equity building, freedom to be with kids, all that. So excellent point, and that makes sense.
Absolutely. And obviously cash flow is important. And that's why the validation stage is equally as important. And the what we call the educational compartment of our process. So learning directly from a franchisor or directly from a franchisee, somebody from my military folks that's tactically working in that business, tactically in the system, you're talking to them directly. how are you operating this business? How is it benefiting you? How's the franchise giving you the support? Are they giving you the support that you need? Do you see yourself working in this business daily? That's a very important thing. Do you see yourself doing that? Is it something that you could do for 7 to 10 years?
Yeah, all important stuff. And, in fact, most people, until they begin working with a coach or, excuse me, take some steps forward on their own to investigate, don't know what the validation journey looks like and what the steps involved are. And certainly the first step after, talking about businesses, if you're working with us, talking to us about businesses, and we usually provide 3 because we want to look at contrasting models, different industries, and kind of broaden possibilities. Starts with that first introductory conversation. It's a 30,000-foot view of the organization. It's really a Q&A session.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that's important to remember in that, and there's probably many things that are important, but one is you're talking to a business development person, and if the personality doesn't click, like if you get on the phone and you don't necessarily like their style of speaking, their accent, whatever it might be, just remember that you're not going to be working with them.
Right.
Sometimes they're biz devs, sometimes they represent a number of different companies, and the one you're looking at happens to be in that portfolio. You're going to be working with the operations, the marketing, a totally different team. So don't let that sway you. If you like the model and you like the industry, push past that.
Absolutely. And, you'll get an opportunity as you progress through your process to actually meet some of those team members that you'll eventually be working with or hypothetically be working with later on down the road. So that kind of brings up the point of, a discovery day or a family day. A lot of different franchises call it something slightly different, but, the general term is discovery day. Typically, since franchises are not bought or sold, they're awarded. And so if you are, very, very deep in the validation phase and you're equally seeing, each other as partners, because that's what it really comes down to. Being in a franchise business, you're in a partnership with that franchise. If both parties are kind of seeing potential and future in that partnership, they'll extend an invitation to do that discovery day or that family day. So where you can go and meet the team, maybe do a tour of the corporate headquarters. Sometimes they do it at a vacation destination. Sometimes they do it in more of a classroom kind of setting. Everyone does it just a little bit differently. But holding out until you get to meet everybody face to face, look in their eye holes and understand each other, and pressing the flesh and having that human connection, it's a game changer. It really is, because you can actually see yourself as being a part of that family. And getting to that point, it takes a little bit of work, though. It takes a lot of validation on your side.
Yeah. I want to just add on Discovery Day. No one can make you buy something. No one can force you to buy something, and you're not going to Discovery Day to buy. You're still validating that business. So we're going to talk about the things that come before that, but you are most certainly getting a face-to-face view, looking at the operation, meeting all the people as part of your learning. Hey, if you choose to move forward and you like what you see, cool. But no one's going to force you to buy that business on the spot. So go in with an open mind and realize that it's still part of the learning process. But let's move back. So after that first conversation,
a little bit.
Usually after that first conversation, when we review businesses and before that introductory call, there's most times a question that comes up. And that question is usually, well, how much can I make in this business, right?
Yeah, money.
Yeah. And,
cash.
How do you talk about that?
Typically, you will see some broad financials on a franchise disclosure document. Sometimes that comes right away. Some franchises send that immediately. They want somebody to know what they're getting into, or even the initial conversation. Some, wait a little while for you to kind of understand the business first Look at, what are some basic questions? What is the business model? Who's the clientele? You know, the small little things first, baby steps, kind of look at that. And then they'll show that franchise disclosure document. But one of the, I think you could disagree with me on this. I think one of the best ways to understand, what you will be making in that business is, that individual franchisee validation. And there's a rule on franchisee validation that I tend to go by. I call it the 20-60-20 rule. So you'll always find some franchisees that are in the bottom 20 of that system, the top 20 in that system that are knocking it out of the park. They're doing very well. And then there's the 60%. They're center mass. They're doing okay. They're doing exactly what is expected in that system. And those folks, the financials from those folks could typically give you a really good idea of what you would earn in that business. Well, why not try to talk to somebody in each of those buckets? Yep. What would it hurt? Understanding why that bottom 20 is not doing so great, and understand why that top 20 are, making, 7 figures in their business. So there's no definite answer on what you're going to make in that business. It's how you see yourself operating in there and how well you understand the business.
Yeah, they're really great points. And, when I'm asked that question, one of the first things that I, like to remind folks I'm talking to is that that's really traditional job market thinking. What's the pay? Where do I commute to? Who am I reporting to? What's my title? And there's so much more, as we talked about, to consideration of business ownership. And what's really critical, and parallel it to a job interview, the first interview, you oftentimes don't talk about salary. This is the meet and greet, right? Do I like what I'm hearing? Do they like what they're hearing from me? And if you go into it with the mindset first that it's important to understand yourself as a day in a life, right? Mm-hmm. Every franchisor by federal law has to produce that disclosure document you're talking about, and you will get your hands on it. And like you said, Jason, it does include, variations of financial disclosures most times. And you read them, and then you talk to people doing the business, and you see for yourself. You kind of treat it like Columbo would, like, it's kind of fun. Terrible Columbo. But right. You have a chance to talk to people and identify yourself against that 20-60-20. As you talk to the people hitting it out of the park, do they think like you, act like you? Do they have similar experiences? Do they do the things you can envision yourself doing? Maybe you belong in that top 20. That's your assessment to make as you're looking at the business and thinking about it, right? All good points. Excellent.
It's very much a personal assessment and a personal judgment call, getting to that point.
Yeah, and listen, it's important for everybody to know that there are income claim rules and regulations we all live by. And we're very sensitive to the idea that, hey, if you get into business, you're putting skin in the game, right? And this is why we help you get all that information. We don't tell you, hey, you can make $200 million next year. By today, we don't tell you anything about income.
Right.
We're more concerned with the right fit, finding a vehicle. So that's all cool. I actually had a client on Tuesday go, dude, Phil, they're sending me this 220-page document. It's like, this is the second step in the validation, right?
Yeah.
I didn't realize I knew they had their first meeting. I didn't realize that the franchisor was already pushing the FDD out.
Sometimes they do it real quick.
And my guy's like, do I need to get an attorney right now? And so let's talk a little bit about the first view of a disclosure document. Number one, you do need to sign it. By law, you need to sign it. It doesn't mean you're agreeing to it. Doesn't mean you bought anything. It just acknowledges the date and time that it got into your hands. And that's by FTC regulation, I believe. What are the things, there's 3 or 4 things that they can skim through and look for. What do you recommend those as?
So off the top of my head, we already talked about the item 19. For those that are very, focused on, the money that they're going to make in the business, that's probably the first thing that most people are going to flip to. I think flipping through, was it the item 23, which is, it also, that shows, how many people are coming and going from that franchise system. You want to know that system has been operating clearly, and they're able to retain their franchisees in their system for a long time. Also, you want to look at the franchise's obligations to you, and that franchise's or your obligation to the franchise. You want to be able to understand that very clearly moving forward. What are some of the things that you're looking at?
One of the things that is required is that there are no surprises. Yep. Yeah, I forget the item numbers, but there's a full outline of every possible expense associated with getting the business up and running. So no surprises there. When you look at the retention numbers in item 23, yeah, it does tell you. And we work with some systems that have 95% retention, 90% retention after 5 years. That can give you some confidence. Then you bounce over to that item 19, and you look. Oftentimes, it's average gross revenue across the system. Sometimes they disclose gross profits. You want to look at that, but look at the organization itself. In the first few items, you learn if there's ever been any legal action taken against the company, any bankruptcies. Towards the end, you're gonna see the P&L for the organization. Make sure that they're healthy, right?
Yeah.
But these are all skim and scan things. If you get further down the road, you may or may not want to bring an attorney to take a look. That's totally your call. Whenever clients ask me if they should, I tell them yes, because I know that they're already thinking in that direction, right?
Yeah.
And some people are comfortable contractually. They can read it on their own. They feel good about that, and that's fine too. So yeah, those are.
I always say, if you're having a hard time understanding anything in that document, and you really you really think that having that attorney is going to, give you that confidence, go ahead and do it. I'll even help you find somebody. What I do caution about is having your family law attorney check out that franchise disclosure document. Obviously, that's not their forte. That's not something that they see every day. So you really want to find somebody that specializes in franchising and business law.
Yeah.
For obvious reasons.
Very good point. With regard to franchise disclosure documents, you will see, as we mentioned, all of those things. Sometimes folks will read it and they'll call me and say, look, can I negotiate the franchise fee? Seems a little high to me. What if I offer them 30 grand, instead of 49 or whatever, 15 instead of 20? And the answer is always no to that, right? Because a franchisor is audited on an annual basis. There needs to be consistency across all the things that they do. And if they started wheeling and dealing, that's not to say they don't discount if you acquire multiple territories, right? But there has to be a consistent methodology even to that. So yeah, that's not negotiable. Sometimes you can pick up a few thousand extra in population.
Yeah. Maybe. But yeah, you'll have some very upset franchisees if Joe got a better deal than John. You're gonna be working with those folks. You don't want to see any kind of favoritism going on there. I think the only other time where there is a little bit of flex is if you're a veteran or have some type of federal benefit coming.
Yeah.
Like the vet grant program or something like that.
All right, so we talked about the disclosure doc, all the things to look for there. We touched a little bit on talking to other franchisees in the system, and that's an excellent source of information. And there's two possible scenarios, right? One is that everyone you talk to is going to be fully disclosed to you, but conversely, if you ever hear 3 people from the same system saying the exact same words, that would raise questions, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
That's why this is part of the validation, to really talk to live human beings, and they should not be scripted. They may not answer all your questions, but those that they choose to, and usually it's most, if not all, you should feel like, hey, this is a genuine human being who's telling me the truth based on their experience. That validates well for a brand, and the other
Absolutely.
scenario certainly doesn't. Now, I've never had that happen, but who knows?
No, no. I do know that certain franchisors, they'll do group like webinars with franchisees where there might be somebody from the actual corporate franchise that will be there during the validation. They're facilitating it. Sometimes those are great because you can get a larger discussion amongst the group. But what do you think about that? Do you think that they should still go out there and try to speak to individuals, or do you think that that is enough to do that group setting kind of validation?
It's a great
Not
question.
a trap.
No, it's a great question. And one of our roles as coaches, well, let's talk about all the roles as coaches, or many of them. We are an objective resource, number one. We're not salespeople or brokers. And that's why it's cool to work with guys that can actually go side by side with you without trying to steer you in any direction, but instead
Right.
helping you gather the data you need. And another really important thing that we can do is sometimes catch blind spots. And the answer to your question is, what's the client feeling? And as we start to talk and he says, yeah, I was on this group call, there's some good questions, I didn't hear the ones that I was looking for, I didn't get a chance to ask them, whatever. Well, what do you think about contacting some franchisees individually, would be my question, right?
Yep.
Yep.
It's all
So
about asking questions. Yeah, and that's a great point. Finding those blind spots. Asking questions that you didn't think of constantly. And I think it's a good idea to do the best of both worlds. I mean, I certainly would. Me personally, I wouldn't feel comfortable doing a validation in a group setting over a webinar. I'd probably want to speak to somebody candidly one on one.
yeah.
And I'd probably, if that wasn't provided to me, I'd probably request it.
Yeah, I certainly would too. I'm not opposed to group sessions, but absolutely I want to talk to people too, and yeah, so I would as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the last thing we should touch on really, and an important part of this is, people often think like, hey man, my bank account's only got 23,000 in checking and savings, and so I can't afford a business. And one of the things we help people learn about is the funding options that are available to them. And when they think out of pocket, they're really thinking about startup entrepreneurship, because startup entrepreneurs oftentimes have a real struggle trying to get outside funding for their business because of the fail rate, right? And the
Yep.
fail rate happens because they're undercapitalized often. So it's kind of a catch-22.
It really is. Yeah.
But there's a lot of options. In fact, monies are often earmarked for successful franchises based on small business administration experience. So let's touch on that.
So yeah, I mean, so the three primary ways to fund your business. Obviously, you touched on the SBA, but there's also the unsecured lending route, and there's the rollover route. So say you've had if you're a military and you had the thrift savings program, you invested into that, or if you have ever invested in an IRA or 401k, there's some benefit to you, even some tax benefit to you, to roll that over into a C corp to fund your business. And you're borrowing from yourself and not from somebody else. That makes a lot of people much more comfortable. And there's even ways to do a combination of both, the unsecured lending route along with that rollover route. Primarily, we mostly get people funded through the SBA because majority of franchises, I think less than 10 years, if you're a franchise, you're in the SBA directory. Sometimes you're in there sooner. So the SBA already recognizes that franchise, and they're much more likely to fund a person going into that franchise.
Yeah, well said all the way around. And one of the things when I talk to people and say, "Did you know the rollover benefit exists?" Like, I'm not touching my retirement, right?
Right. Yeah. That's my nest egg.
Yeah, but we
Yep.
respect that. And what I say in response is two things. Number one, remember what happened in 2008. right? We all took a hit in our 401ks, or most every American did.
Yeah.
And, think about what's going on in the current economy, what could happen in the future. And if you have the thought that maybe there's going to be dips and flows, or you've experienced that, you can shelter some of yourself from some of those dips potentially, and look at how the business performs, what you think your returns look like based on the things you learn, compare it to that 8 to 12% traditional growth that 401ks see,
Yeah.
and you'll see if it's a wise move or not. But don't discount it because it's tax.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, the value of those 401ks are more likely to decline than not. I think I saw something on Forbes the other day that pending the next recession, which we're already overdue for, those 401ks could turn to 201ks.
Yeah, pretty quickly.
Pretty quickly. So like you said, sheltering those funds into a business that is more of an active investment, something that you're building a lot more equity into. A lot of people they flip their franchises at the end of their contract, and they resell them for much more than what they started with. So you could think of that as that active investment, and diversifying your portfolio.
Yep.
Rather than dipping into your nest egg.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And, I just want to touch real quickly because I know we're coming to the end of our time. The SBA, Small Business Administration, has monies earmarked for franchise businesses. And they have, one of the products they have is called the Express Loan. It's up to $150,000. Importantly, it can be used to cover the startup costs of a business as well as to pay yourself a salary. So
that's paying yourself a salary through that.
In the validation process, you'll get a sense from the people you talk to of how long the ramp up period is, meaning how long does it take before I start seeing, money coming into my business. And some businesses, what I call runway businesses, things everyday Americans use every day, it's a question of who they're going to use them from. Those can ramp up really quickly. And you'll find that out, right? So you can see where that point hits between paying yourself a salary using SBA and when you start getting money back. You can project it out as far as you want to. And if you want to do that, the information is going to be there if you dig hard enough, right?
Absolutely. And sometimes that franchise has that data on the typical return on investment kind of data, so to help you project that a little bit.
Yep. Cool. We are close to the end. So any last thoughts? Anything we haven't touched on?
Any questions out there? I got a couple of viewers right now. Go ahead and type in if you have any last second questions. If not, we'll be back later on today. What time will we be back?
Yeah, 11 a.m. Pacific time, 2 p.m.
2 p.m.
Yeah.
2 p.m. So 2 p.m. Eastern. We'll be back. We'll be on Phil's page. So you'll get the best of both worlds. You see me today, or see me this morning, and then you're going to see Phil later this afternoon. Hopefully we can get the split screen to work. If not, we'll put up the Zoom video, and everybody will be able to see everything.
Yep. Rocking.
All right, man. Talk to you again soon.
All right, brother. Thanks so much.